Hi, my name is Randy Jacob, and I want to just talk about the 23rd Psalm and some of the things that I've learned over the years and how it applies to that shepherd-sheep relationship. And so we get maybe a better understanding of how the Lord takes care of us. Incidentally, I go to 11:15, so if you haven't seen me, that could be why. My wife and I have also taught the Daniel plan several times here at the church. And so you may know me from that, but nonetheless, we'll go through this one verse at a time, and we'll talk about each one and hopefully get a little bit better understanding. So Psalm 23, and I'll read out of the NIV. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. And even though, or he guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And then verse 4, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So obviously, this psalm is written from a perspective of a sheep. So let's understand or get a better understanding between the shepherd-sheep relationship as to how that applies to our relationship with the Lord. So beginning in verse 1, it says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. So the first thing I want to draw out is that the Lord is my shepherd. It's a personal relationship. Every sheep knew the shepherd's voice, and the shepherd knew the sheep's voice. It was a very close and trusting relationship between the two. And that's an important aspect of our relationship with Christ and what the Lord does for us. Verse 2, he says, it makes me lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside still waters. The sheep are inherently a little skittish and can get scared and startled and start running, and pretty soon they'll run, away from the flock. And so the shepherd will go and he'll grab the sheep and he'll hold it close. And then he will actually forcibly, but tenderly, make it lie down in the green pasture and actually eat the grass that's underneath it. Thus, he makes us lie down in green pastures. And the application is obvious. I mean, in our hectic world of so many things going on and so many things to draw our attention, sometimes the Lord needs to take us and make us lie down in green pastures so that we can literally eat the grass, the green grass that's underneath us that he provides. And he leads me beside still waters. Literally, this means that he leads me beside waters that have been stilled. So imagine this. So after a long day, the shepherd leads his sheep to a creek, a stream of water that's rushing and running. Now, sheep are inherently afraid of water or don't like to get wet. So and they won't drink from this water because it's running and they're afraid they'll get wet. So what the shepherd will do is he'll step in with his staff and he'll move some big rocks around. So he'll actually create kind of a dammed area in the creek, and that will still the waters. Now, once the waters are stilled, the sheep will take right up and start drinking from that and get their fill and get refreshed. So that's kind of how the shepherd takes care of the sheep. Next is he restores my soul. Now, sometimes the shepherd will have his flock, but he might have one that they'll see this little clump of grass over along the way, and the sheep will go off and go to that grass start eating it, and then he'll see another one, and pretty soon he's wandered off from the flock. And then so come nighttime, the shepherd is going through and he starts calling their names and listening to their response. And he notices that one's missing, or maybe a couple. So he'll actually leave the flock, as Jesus talked about. He'll lead the flock and go out and look for that one that wandered off. And so then once he finds it, he'll pull out and get him out of thistles or a hole or whatever he got himself into, and bring him back to the flock. Now, if a particular sheep might have got into wandering maybe a little bit too much, too habitually, what the shepherd does is he'll take the sheep, once he rescues them out of the situation they got themselves into, he'll bring the sheep up, start carrying it back, and he'll hold it close to his chest, close to his heart, and he will actually take and abruptly break a leg. And then he'll immediately take and splint the leg, and then hold the sheep close so they understand that he cares for them. But it's that correction that the shepherd provides, because obviously wandering is dangerous, because there's a lot of predators out there. There's a lot of things that they could get into that actually could be quite harmful to them. And so he actually corrects their behavior. And then, in all that time, the shepherd is taking care of his restoration and restoring that sheep to the flock on a permanent basis, not just bringing it back and then he wanders off again, bringing it back and he wanders off again. Now he's learned a lesson by him breaking his leg and then splitting it, letting it heal, and the sheep is dependent on him during his restoration time. The Lord also does that for us. If we sometimes wander off, he'll go out and get us and bring us back, and if we do that very often, we may find out that he, corrects us and during that restoration time, and then we have to really take that lesson to heart and change our behavior sometimes. So, but that's what the Lord does for us. And so let's go down to the next one. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Now, he was just talking about green pastures, stilled waters, and now all of a sudden, he guides me in paths of righteousness. So, the shepherd leads us in the paths that are right and where we need to go, and the sheep follow him. They trust the shepherd. They trust his knowledge and his how he takes care of them. And so that trust is there that, the path that he chooses is the path that the sheep are going to be safe in and where they need to go. And then we get into verse 4, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, and thy rod, thy staff, they comfort me. So if we go from green pastures, still waters, and so now we go into the valley of the shadow of death, what happened here? Well, so if you're familiar with shepherding and the shepherd-sheep relationship, what happens is during the early part of the year, the shepherd has the sheep grazing in lowlands. And then as the sun in summer comes and starts melting the snow at the top of the mountains, there's better grazing up there because it hasn't been used and it's all fresh and well watered and from the snow melt and whatnot. So he will lead his sheep to better grazing up high. And sometimes that path may take the sheep in a valley of the shadow of death, a dark area where dangers are around. There's predators about, but they trusted the shepherd to take care of them. And so he says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The sheep did not fear because a shepherd led, and he was taking them, and he was with them, and he was literally right beside them going through that valley. They feared no evil. Thy rod, thy staff. The rod was actually about a 2-foot long piece of wood. Oftentimes, one end was whittled out of the knot of a tree, so it was like pretty hard. And then the shepherd would actually pound pieces of metal into it to make it a pretty bad weapon. I mean, to fight all predators and whatnot. And not only could he swing it and protect the sheep from predators close at hand, but he could actually take that and use it as a missile practically across the heads of the sheep, over across the flock, and take out a lion or wolves or anything that might be threatening the sheep. So the sheep took comfort in the rod and the staff. The staff he would often use to pull them out of thickets and holes or whatever the sheep would get into. So they certainly trusted and wanted that, the shepherd to have the staff, because it helped him get them out of bad situations and whatnot. So the rod and staff, they comforted him, comforted the sheep, and that's how they would fear no evil, because the shepherd did take care of them. So now verse 5 is, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Now, it would seem that this was a breakdown of the narrative and the analogy of the shepherd-sheep relationship, because obviously no sheep actually sat at a table and ate. So what is he talking about? So again, let's think about this for a moment. So now we get to the shepherd is taking his sheep, and they come to a brand new field, one that they'd never ate at before or grazed in before. Before the shepherd would turn them loose on the field, there were potential enemies in the field that he needed to make sure were taken care of and weren't there. Namely, what in biblical times, there was a small little viper, brown skin viper that lived in the ground. They would burrow holes in the ground, and they would be in fields. And once they sensed the sheep's presence, they would come up and nip at their nose, and sometimes that could lead to an infection and ultimately could kill the sheep. So instead of just turning them loose, he would actually hold them at bay while he went through the field, namely looking for these vipers in the ground, looking for the holes. So he would take his staff and he'd knock down the tall grass and stuff, all just walking back and forth, looking for these holes. And when he found the hole, he would take with him a thick bottle of oil. And the oil he would take when he found a hole, and he would pour it at the top of the hole. And he would go through, continue doing this all throughout the field. And then when the sheep got released into the field, once the vipers sensed their presence, which surely they would try to come up through their hole to nip at the sheep, and they would literally become captives of their hole, because once they encountered that oil, it would get slippery and they couldn't get out of their hole. They were literally captives of their in the hole that they had in the ground, thus protecting the sheep, and they could graze the field without worrying about the vipers. The vipers are still there, so they literally had the table, the field, prepared right in the presence of their enemies. He didn't remove the enemy; he just protected them. And then, as an additional measure, he would take that oil and he would pour it on the sheep's head. And so that would be an additional repellent. It actually had an aroma that the vipers didn't like. So he would anoint their head with oil to help protect them. Additionally, if one of the vipers did happen to get out of its hole, they would not want to attack the sheep because of the oil that was on the head, and they didn't like that smell. So thus another twofold protection there that the shepherd provided. And then my cup overflows. Well, so when they come up to, like we talked about, the quieted waters, that he literally stilled that creek, the running creek. Sometimes, if they couldn't find a stream, the shepherd may find a well, although they were kind of rare out there. But if he found a well, there oftentimes that water's 100 foot down into the ground, and they had like a leather pouch or bucket, that's kind of a loosely term, but it was a leather pouch kind of thing that they would lower down, get water in, and bring it up, and they would put it in these stone cups kind of thing. And as we talked about earlier, sheep don't like to get wet, so it was an additional measure of kindness that the shepherd would show its sheep if he would fill those cups to overflowing, so that the sheep could drink easily and without having to get their head down into the cup, and it was just an additional measure of love that shepherd showed the sheep. It's an amazing thing that the Lord takes care of us right in the presence of our enemies. He doesn't say that he's going to bring you out of it, as far as out of this world. He's just going to protect you inside this world. It's clear that the Lord has not isolation in mind, but actually insulation in mind. So he's not going to isolate you from the world, but he's going to insulate you from the world and the effects that it has on us. And now the last verse: surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Goodness and mercy were one of the benefits that our relationship that we have with the Lord, that we have as God's children, and it follows us. It's almost like one fellow put it as the watchdogs of the sheep, and so the watchdogs follow the sheep around or the sheepdogs rather, follow the sheep around and keep them, crowd around, so don't get themselves in trouble and out away from the flock, and they follow the sheep, and that's what goodness and mercy does with us, all given by the Lord. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Again, we talk about I will dwell in the house of the Lord. So the Lord, at the beginning, it talked about the Lord being our shepherd. It's the same Lord. So that same Lord that is our shepherd provides us the house. And I will dwell in that house, the Lord's house, forever. And it's a great analogy that he talks about. This was very familiar with David, King David, which wrote this song, this psalm. So his childhood, that's what he did, was shepherding. In fact, when Samuel came to see about the new king of the land of Israel, it was that's what he was doing at the time, was out in the field, tending his flock. And when Samuel called him to come in, his father brought him in, and he was obviously selected at that point. But so he was quite familiar with the whole concept of a shepherd-sheep relationship, and the effects and how that relationship is. And then he basically just ties us as children of God, and how that ties with God himself and the Lord, and how he takes care of us in every aspect. So I guess you could summarize this chapter, this Psalm 23, by a series of I shall not lack anything. I shall not lack this and that. And so here, we'll just go down through them. I shall not lack rest. Why? Because he makes me lie down in green pastures. I shall not lack peace, because he leads me beside quiet waters. I shall not lack restoration, because he restores my soul. I shall not lack guidance or fellowship. He guides me in the paths of righteousness. I shall not lack courage when my way is dark. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I shall not lack companion. Why? For you are with me. I shall not lack comfort. Why? Because your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I shall not lack protection. Why? Because you prepare a table in the presence of my enemies. I shall not lack power, because you anoint my head with oil. I shall not lack abundance, because my cup overflows. That's abundance. I shall not lack God's presence, because surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And I shall not lack security, because I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So I've got to ask, is the Lord your shepherd? If he's not, I encourage you to ask him to be your shepherd, to take you in as one of his sheep. And you can have all these wonderful benefits, this relationship that you can have with the Lord, and then ultimately at the end of our life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever, is the ultimate benefit that we can have. It's a great experience. It's a great thing, and I really encourage you to do it. If the Lord is not your shepherd, please make and ask him to be your shepherd. Thank you, and I hope you got some benefit out of this little study, and we'll talk to you later. God bless you.